समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार छे 14 पुरवनो सार समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार छे 14 पुरवनो सार एना महिमानो नहीं पार एनो अर्थ अनंत अपार एना महिमानो नहीं पार एनो अर्थ अनंत अपार समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार छे 14 पुरवनो सार समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार छे 14 पुरवनो सार સુખમાં સમરો દુઃખમાં સમરો સમરો દિવસ નિરાત જીવતા સમરો મરતા સમરો સમરો સૌ સંગાત સમરો મંત્ર ભલો નવકાર એ છે 14 પુરવનો સાર સમરો મંત્ર ભલો નવકાર એ છે 14 પુરવનો સાર योगी समरे भोगी समरे समरे राजा रंग देवो समरे दानव समरे समरे सोनी शंख समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार ए छे 14 पुरवनो सार समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार ए छे 14 पुरवनो सार अड़सत अक्षर एना जानो अड़सत तीरथ सार 8 संपदा थी परमाणो अड़सिद्धि दातार समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार ए छे 14 पुरवनो सार समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार ए छे 14 पुरवनो सार नवपद एना नवनिध आपे भव भवना दुख कापे वीर वचन थी हृदय व्यापे परमतम पद आपे समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार ए छे 14 पुरवनो सार समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार ए छे 14 पुरवनो सार
Jai Jinendra and Pranam to everyone. A very warm welcome to this week's Jainism classes. Today, the topic which Dr. Ajit Pai is going to enlighten us on is fundamentals of doing and being. Before I hand over to Ajit Pai, the music you just heard, Samara Mantra, I hope all of you enjoyed that song. It's actually done by one of our members who lives in Singapore. And this week, when I send out the email, WhatsApp messages to you, I'm going to be sending you a link. She's just launched an album called Atma as a gift to the Oshawa community. And you'll be able to download that completely free of charge, play it in your cars, on your mobiles, etc. So watch out for that link to come through in our communication to you this week. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Ajit Bhai to come forward and take over.
Thank you, Sandeep Bhai. Pranam Badane. Jai Jinendra to everybody. We are now in week 4 of the Jainism classes, Introduction to Jainism. I'll start off with the prayer and then get into this topic today. A lot of people have asked about having the prayers displayed in words. So I've got a slide of one of the prayers that is probably unfamiliar to you, and I'll put that on the screen in a minute. Hope you can all see this. Okay, let's start.
Ajit Bhai, if you put it on the slide mode.
Yeah, sorry, thanks. Okay. Namo Ariyantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Ujjayanam, Namo Loe Sabbasahunam, Eso Panchanamukaro Sabba Pavapanasano, Mangalanancha Sabvesim Padamam Havai Mangalam. Veera Sarvasura Surendra Mahito Virambuda Sansrita Virena Bhiyata Swakarmani Cheo Viraya Nityam Nama Vira Tirthamidam Pravutamatulam Virashaghoram Tapo Vire Sri Druti Kirtikanti Nichaya Sri Virabhadram Disa Anguthe Amrutavase Laptitana Bandar Shri Guru Gautama Samariye Manavanchita Fadatar. I will explain the meaning of the last 2 verses that I just sang. As I said last time, the prayer Veera Sarvasura Surendra Mahito is, sorry, I think this keeps on, is actually from the Saklarth Chaitya Vandan, which is recited during the 14-day Pratikramana, the 4-month Pratikramana, and the 7th-sari Pratikramana. It's quite a long Chaitya Vandan, which describes the virtues of the 24 Tirthankas. And this is the verse, one of the verses in praise of Bhagwan Mahavir. So basically it means that Veer Swami, who's been worshipped by the Indras and the Devas, and even the Pandit scholars have taken refuge and have been able to destroy their karmas, may we always bow down to Mahavir Swami, who has performed difficult austerities and possesses the patience, the fame, and the brightness. Please bless us all. Sri Veera Bhadram Disa. The other prayer is in praise of Gautam Ganadhar, who is the first disciple of Bhagwan Mahavir, Guru Gautam. So Anguthe Amrut Vase Labdi Tana Bandar, meaning he who had great powers even in his thumb, Labdi Tana Bandar, he had lots of other powers, so he was a treasure of different powers. And I think I briefly explained this particular uh, power residing in his thumb last time. Anguthe Amrut Vase Lapti Tana Bandar Sri Guru Gautama Samariye. So we remember Guru Gautam Manvanchita Fad Datar, meaning he who will give you whatever you desire. Manvanchit, whatever your mind desires. Fad Datar, meaning the gift or the reward. Datar, meaning the one who gives. So anything good and auspicious comes from remembering, bowing down to, respecting Guru Gautam. So that is the meaning of that prayer. And during all such religious activities, we remember Bhagwan Mahavir, we remember our gurus, and that is the tradition. You may hear a lot of other verses from different people, but most of them are in praise of the Dev, that is the Aryans or Tirthankars, and the Gurus. Okay. Now I'll share the slides. Oh, apologies, sorry. Okay, so hope you can all see the slides. So Jain Dharma, an introduction, week 4. Just a reminder, the format of the sessions is understanding the process and outcome, listening, reflecting, debating, questioning, internalizing what we hear, and trying to incorporate all that we've learned in life. A lot of you have asked about books. I've mentioned this, but just something that you may be able to just note down on. I mentioned this book by Atmasiddhi Sastra, which with a commentary in English by Pujya Rakesh Bhai, and it's been published recently by HarperCollins. This particular book is a comprehensive sort of textbook of Jainology, and it is extracted from the teachings of Bhuvan Banu Suriswarji Maharaj Sahib, who was a great Acharya, and he had probably given discourses on basic principles of Jain Dharma, and this book is extracted from that and translated very beautifully. So that is something that is also available, and this is available, and I've got a source, so depending on who wants it, we can actually get the whole good supply of that from Manish Modi in India. So and I've been in discussion with Sandeep Bhai about this. So these are the two books that I would recommend about some of the fundamentals. Atmasiddhi Sastra is actually very well written in English, but there are Gujarati and Sanskrit verses of that Shastra itself. Okay. Right. I know some of you may be finding the approach a bit difficult, but the aim of the last few lessons that we have been focusing on is to try and introduce some of the fundamental concepts that we can then think about and debate about, and then expand a bit more on some of the knowledge-based principles, but also some of the very wide different topics, like for example, the topics of Art Karma, Navtattva, Chadravya, the vows of a monk, the vows of a Jain householder, the 35 virtues of somebody who is following the path, the 12 bhavanas. There are lots of different topics, and each one of them we can illustrate one by one, but depending on how the group is actually finding what we have done so far in terms of how much it helps them understand the religion, then we can modify it. And Sandeepa will be sharing a questionnaire that we will be discussing at the end. So one of the things that we are constantly busy with in our lives, actually we are always busy with something. We are doing things. We don't stop doing. But if you look at what our ultimate state is, what our true self is, in that state of being, the soul has nothing to do. The soul is complete in the way it is, without any action, without any attachment, without anything at all. Because it is complete and pure, it doesn't need anything. So the goal is to be one's true self. One's true self is free, unencumbered, totally independent, unconditionally joyful, omniscient, all-powerful, absolutely universally compassionate, and eternally stable. Meaning there is no, once one reaches the state of moksha or nirvana, there is no going anywhere else, there is no coming back anywhere. So I was talking to my nephew, my nephew's son, just a couple of days ago, and he was asking, he's about 10 years old, and he was asking very simple questions, but they were quite profound. And one of the questions that he was asking me, he had this idea in his mind that when in the next time cycle, the 24 Tirthankas that we have had in this time cycle will all come back. So he says, he was asking me, will they come back as Bhagwan or as Tirthankas? And I was trying to explain to him the concept of moksha and nirvana, that once the soul goes there, there is no rebirth from that, and that is what we all as Jains and all living beings are ultimately looking for in everything that we are striving for, because we are looking for happiness, and the ultimate happiness is only there. And that state is permanent, so eternally stable, eternally there. The journey to being all this involves doing the right thing in a stepwise manner. So one cannot distinguish, one cannot say that we will only concentrate on being without doing in the current state that we are. You got to take some steps towards that path that ultimately frees us from this cycle of doing, from this cycle of being born and then dying, being born and then dying. Because everything that we experience during our life and birth and death are the results of the karmas that we have acquired because we've been doing. But we cannot escape that without actually continuing to do certain things. But the difference is in choosing the right path, in following the path of doing, which will ultimately lead to the state of just being and not needing to do anything. So we are coming to some terms that you may have heard before. It's actually described in many different ways, and I've struggled with understanding these two concepts, absolute and relative, nischay and vyavhar. Just try and remember these terms, because once you go deeper into it, you will come across a lot of discussion about nischay and vyavhar. And this is going deep into the philosophy, but I think it's important to understand that. And it's only recently where I started reading some of the pravachans by Param Pujya Acharya Bhagwan Sri Dharma Suriswarji Maharaj Sahib. We had recited these pravachans in the 1950s on Bhagavati Sutra, which is one of the most fundamental and beautiful sutras that was written originally by Sudharma Swami, who was the leader of Jain Dharma after Bhagwan Mahavir, because he was the most long-lived Ganadhar. From Bhagwan Mahavir's position, he was the next great guru. That was Sudharma Swami. And whatever he said has been put together in Bhagavati Sutra, and there is a huge amount to be learned from that. And some of the things that I am talking about today are from the pravachans or vyakhyans, the discourses of Param Pujya Acharya Bhagwan Sri Dharma Suriswarji Maharaj Sahib, and he has actually described everything so beautifully. So, to understand what is nischay and vyavhar, if we start with a simple idea that if your focus and the activities that one does to actually achieve that focus takes you to a path that ultimately is not likely to bring you the right rewards, because the path is faulty, the activities therefore are faulty. So what is the path, or what is the absolute and what is the relative? So he gives a very simple example. He says, in our daily lives, what we all normally do is we are very clear about what our activities are designed to do. We have a clear direction, and we know very clearly what we want to set out to do. So he just gives a simple example to the people who were present at the time of this pravachan, is that if you are going to the market to buy some vegetables, in your mind you have decided that I want some shak, I want some tomatoes, I want some chilies, I want some dana, I want some limbu, I want this, I want that. You go out with a list in your mind or a list written down. You go to the market, you visit the various stalls there and pick what you want, and you come back home. So the goal that you set, that I want to purchase this, is the nischay. that is your goal for the day, and the vyavahar is the process you follow to achieve that goal. So similarly, but that particular goal and that particular task that we set ourselves is limited. It accomplishes something, but if we are going to achieve something on a spiritual level that is everlasting, then our goal focus, what goal we decide, needs to be clear, and that will lead to spiritual progress. But the difficulties that we've always faced as the souls going from one life to other, and in this life as well, that we have not really understood who we are. So that is where Atma-Siddhi Shastra comes in. That is where we have been sort of discussing over the last several weeks. So we start off with understanding who we are, and then deciding that in reality what I am is where I want to get to. And then understanding that my current state is far from that. In what ways? It is far from that in the fact that I have a body, I was born, the body gets older and older and ultimately will die, and I'll have to depart this to occupy another body. So understanding that true state of ourselves and the current state of ourselves, and by definition or by exploration of that idea, the state of all living beings in the universe. And at some stage in the next couple of lessons, we'll come to some of the, we discussed the Samyaktana Shatsthan, that is what is described in the Atma-Siddhi Shastra, but we'll come to the state of progress of the soul from something very basic where the first virtues start and how it progresses to samta or upsam that we'll discuss a bit later today. So we'll come back to that. Distinguishing between what is beneficial to ourselves and what is detrimental to the true self. So understanding who we are and what is good for us and what is not necessarily good for us in spiritual terms. We all know what we want. We all have some idea of what is good for achieving that goal and what is not good for achieving that goal. We make mistakes sometimes along the way in spite of trying, and then we see the consequences of those mistakes as well within a short time, or sometimes much longer, and sometimes not necessarily in this life but in future lives. Okay, now we got about 30 minutes, and we might actually finish this class a bit early, so leave us a bit more time at the end to maybe discuss certain questions. But if I go back to the previous slide, as far as the soul is concerned, and spiritual progress is concerned, accepting this most fundamental basic distinction between ourselves as occupying the body and our independent self, and knowing the difference. Most of the time, our beliefs are centered on the fact that we are who we are. So I would think of everything that I do during the day and everything that I engage in with my work, with my things that I do at home, most of the time the focus is the body, the career, the health of the body, the relationships with friends, family members, everybody else. And none of that is permanent. None of that is something that there would be a connection in future lives, but that connection would be with the soul rather than the particular self that we have encountered in this particular life. And obviously everything else that we have acquired in this life in terms of material wealth and material things will disappear. None of us can take anything with us. The body changes as well. So any diseases, any problems that we suffer from in this life will have gone in the next life, more or less. Okay. And to then understand what is beneficial to us, we have to understand the difference between us in the body and us independently, but then also we have to desire that. The problem is that our attraction to the physical and the material is so strong that it becomes extremely difficult to actually see the value of what can be much greater and better without any of the material attachments. So many years ago in one of my classes, I was describing the state of moksha. And the definition there is that you're not doing anything there, you're just being. And one of the students in the class was quite clearly commented, he says, what's the point if you're not doing anything? So the distinction between being and doing and our total attachment to activity and doing is something that we all find extremely difficult to actually digest and then live by. Let's talk about Chilatiputra. This is a very well-known story. A lot of you may have heard of it before. This particular story is about a person who was around at the time that Bhagwan Mahavir was there. And we start the story how it is described in different books. What you'll find on the internet is a very good version in English, which is from one of the Jain sites from the US. That does not describe the previous birth of Shilatiputra, but we'll start off with that. In his previous life, the hero of our story was a Brahmin called Yagnadev. He was married, he was very attached to his wife was very attached to him. At some stage, he became interested in Jain Dharma and became a monk. And he lived a life of a monk in a very decent way, but he was constantly troubled by some physical ailments. But he bravely carried on. The reason why he was troubled by physical ailments was because his wife, in her love for him or her attachment to him, had utilized some bad spells or some bad influences on him that continued to make him ill for a long time. Because of his great penance and the way he lived his life as a monk, Yagnadev, when he dies in that life, goes to Devlok. He is born as a heavenly being. His wife, after having seen him die, also becomes quite detached from her life as in the society, and she becomes a nun as well, and she finishes her life as well and gets born in Swarg in Devlok as a heavenly being. In the next life, there was a businessman called Dhanadat who employed a maid or a dasi called Chilati. And this maid gave birth to a son, and because he was the son of Chilati, he was called Chilati Putra. His wife from the previous life, so Yagnadev's wife, gets born as the daughter of this businessman, Dhanadat, and her name was Sushima. Now, Chilatiputra was given the task of minding Susima. She was much younger than him, and he and she became quite attached as young children, and he's performing his duties and looking after her because Sushima was a child, and sometimes he found it difficult to calm her down when she was troubled and very excited. He found a way of calming her down by touching her in her private parts. That is how it's being described in the story. And one day, Susima's father saw this, and he obviously became extremely upset. When they're both young, they're both quite, Sushima is quite small, Chilatiputra is probably not much older, but Dhanadat becomes extremely upset, and he throws Chilatiputra out of his household, and Chilatiputra then has nowhere else to go. He gets out of town and wanders in the forest and comes across a whole group of dacoits who in those times used to live in the forest. They used to have their own villages, and they survived by robbing the local people in the town that was around in the towns that were around their villages. So he finds a group of dacoits and they take him in, and the leader of those dacoits or robbers trains him and realizes how focused and how strong he was. And when he dies, he gives him the leadership position for this group of robbers. So Chilatiputra, from being the son of a maid living in a fairly decent household, gets thrown away from that household and becomes a robber, and a very successful one. And as he grows older, the attraction that he had for Sushima and the bond that they had over their previous lives keeps on troubling him, and he wants to get back to her, but obviously he's now a robber. If he goes back and talks with her father, he's not any way going to give him Sushima in marriage. So he obviously understood that that was no way that he could go and ask her. So the only way he thought he could actually uh, live with Sushima was to go and abduct her. So this has been going on in his mind for a long time, for years, and one day he has a discussion with all his fellow robbers and him as a leader. He says, let's go to this town. We will rob this particular uh, businessman Seth's house. You can take everything that you want, but leave Sushima to me. So they all go together as a group and they run havoc in the household. They rob whatever they need, whatever they want, and they start running. And Chilatiputra grabs hold of Sushima and starts running with her. Now Seth Tandat and his 5 sons, realizing that his youngest daughter and their young sister has been abducted, run after the thieves, particularly after Chilatiputra, with their swords, with their uh, people who were in charge of security there. So they got soldiers or people, policemen, kind of people with them, and they're running after Chilatiputra, who is grabbing and running with Sushima as fast as he can. The other robbers have all dispersed. The Seth Dhanadat is not bothered about anything else that he's lost. All he wants is his daughter back home alive. And they're all focused on that, and they start running after Chilatiputra. And he keeps on running with Sushima. He's obviously strong and can run fast, but Sushima cannot keep up with his speed, and he realizes that very soon, if I'm going to be running with Sushima, then I'm going to get caught. On the one hand, he's got this great desire that he wants to marry and live with the woman that he loves. On the other hand, he thinks that if I leave her behind, I will never have her. So if he wanted to escape, he could leave her and then run away. But then he thinks that if I leave her, then she will be somebody else's. She will live with somebody else. So his mind in the rag, mo, in that attachment that he has with Sushima, gets so warped up in that he goes mad, and he says the only way I can escape and ensure that Sushima does not become anybody else's is to kill her. And in that madness of the moment and what's been going on in his mind all the time, he cuts her throat with his sword, and he takes her head in his hand and starts running with that decapitated head of the only person that he loved. And as soon as the Ganadath Seth and his sons see that Sushima has been murdered now and they can see her body there, they are in they don't see any point in pursuing Chilatiputra, and they are so shocked and upset and unhappy that this has happened and grieving that they all take Sushma's body and go back home. So Chilatiputra escapes from those people who were chasing him, but the deed that he has done the cruel act of killing the person that he loved is constantly troubling him. He's walking, but he's shell-shocked. He's extremely upset. He's extremely repentant about what he has done, and he is desperately looking for some way that would give him some peace of mind. So all this while, he's got a sword in one hand. I was trying to find a picture of this, and I've seen elements, but I can't find anything on the internet. But this has been very well illustrated by some painters in different books that I've seen in the past. But just imagine, he's got Chilati Putra, who on his face has got great grief, great anger, total desperation, walking with the head of a beautiful lady in one hand and a naked sword which is covered with blood in the other hand, and is just walking in the jungle, in the forest like that. Then suddenly he comes across a monk who is standing in penance, and he's so desperate, he goes to the monk and he says, "This is what I've done. Give me an honest way out of this. This is what I've done. I've killed the person that I've loved, and I've been a robber, and I've done so many bad things in my life. Give me something, or if you can give it to me immediately. If you don't, I'm going to cut your head off as well." So he's battling with his anger, with his repentance, and he's fighting the only way that he can. Now this Muni had great knowledge. He was very knowledgeable. He immediately understands where this man is and what is feeling, and where his spiritual progress lies. And he had some special powers as well. He was what is called a Charan Muni. Charan Muni is somebody who has the ability to fly. So he's standing there and he gives this person, Chilati Putra, 3 words. The monk says, "Upsam Vivek Samvar." And as soon as he said those words and Chilati Putra has heard them, he just flies away. And Chilati Putra is standing there just mulling over this. He says, "The monk has given me these 3 words that I have no understanding of. And being a monk, he would not give me anything that did not have the answer to my dilemma and the state that I'm in. And he would not fly away or go away without helping me. So whatever he has done, he has given me something that is going to help me. But what do these words mean? What is it that he has actually told me to do?" He said, "Upsama." What that means is calm down, quieten down, become peaceful. And slowly he begins to understand that, and he starts practicing that. So he's standing there with this head in one hand, the sword in the other hand, and as soon as he calms down, he says, "I've got the instruments of violence in my hand, I've got the evidence of my extreme violence in my hand," and he drops them both. And he's just standing there thinking this through. What did he mean by Vivek? She says he understands the word and is gradually taking the meaning of it in the deeper sense as to how it reflects on who he is and what he has done. So this is discernment between what is right and what is wrong, and recognizing all the wrong things that he's done. So he starts thinking about his long life, what he had done as a child, the kinds of activities the activity that he got engaged with in his relationship with the young Susima, and the fact that then that Sit threw him out, his attachment to his mother and his relationship with them, and the wrong things that he did when he became a robber, and all the previous robberies that he had done, and the life that he had led in the past, and all that flashed through his mind, and he begins to really repent. He begins to understand that everything that I have done in the past was wrong. I had not understood what is the right thing for me to do, what was decent, what was honest, what was non-violent. And he starts remembering everything that he had done that was wrong and saying Michami Duktam in his mind and repenting everything wrong that he had done. And then the third word that was given to him was restraint, meaning now that you understood what was wrong and what is right, you want to stop doing what was wrong. So you got to stop being angry, you got to stop being lustful, you got to stop being violent, you got to stop stealing from people, you got to stop being dishonest about everything. And he, in this state of mind, is actually getting to a state spiritually which is nearing the state of a monk. And he's just standing there in deep meditation, and he is in the middle of the forest but along a path. So people are coming along that path and walking, they see him, they realize who he is, but they're afraid seeing those instruments of violence and the head of Sushima lying there and him being completely, the sword being covered in blood and him being a lot of blood having spilled on him as well. And he's quite a frightening scene there. So people look at him, realize who he is because he was a well-known dacoit robber, and are afraid of him, but also very angry at him. They start throwing abuse at him. Some from a distance start throwing stones at him. And Chilatiputra, now that he's understood what is right and wrong, and understood the pacification, the calmness, upsam, vivek, samvar, he does not react to any of this. He takes the abuse, he takes everything without getting angry. He's just focusing on all the wrong things he's done and understands that he deserves this and much, much worse. And he's slowly calming down, and as he's getting into a state of deep meditation, with all the blood that is around him and on that head, the jungle ants get attracted to that blood and start swarming in, and they constantly they come near him and start climbing on his body and biting him, and he stays in that position for 2.5, 3 days. And by this time the ants have eaten him up almost, and he dies, leaves his body, and is born again in Swarg, in Devlok, as a celestial being. Now, how does this story relate to our topic? So Chilatiputra, throughout his life, was doing things that were completely detrimental to his spiritual health. And in the last moment, after he had committed some heinous acts, he begins to reflect back on who he is and what his true self is, being upsam, meaning being calm, being yourself, staying within yourself, understanding what is right and wrong, and then stopping everything that is spiritually harmful. So upsam vivek samvar, and as he has digested this, his focus changes. So his goal has changed from wanting wealth, stealing wealth, and wanting the love of a woman. He's completely focused on himself spiritually and repenting on everything wrong that he's done. That is the story. We got a few minutes to spare. What I would like people to do is reflect on this, because there is a lot behind this. And I know we have finished in a short time, but everything that we have talked today is actually a very, very important topic, and it in some ways brings together a lot of things that we have discussed so far. I will end here today, and I will leave this space open for people to ask any questions. Sandeepai has had some from the previous lessons, so we can start off with that. Sandeepai, if you're happy with that. Next week, the topic is questions and answer, and any doubts that we have. And I will put down some myself of what I think may come up, but also it will be quite useful if all of you think about what you learned so far and write down a few questions and send them over to Sandeepai, who can then share it with me, and I'll prepare the lesson around that. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Ajit bhai, last week's question you've actually answered in terms of the prayer and slides, and if need be, we can share that with the audience when I send out the emails. But Kavit has received 2 or 3 questions today, so I'm going to ask Kavit to fire away the questions, turn on his camera and fire the questions, or just fire the questions away, Kavit, and to Dr. Ajit.
Thank you, Sandeepai. The first question we had, the ultimate aim is to reach moksha. Is this something that is attainable in this life cycle, or is it a continuous work or of progress through several life cycles?
Okay. I mean, looking at ourselves and what is actually required in terms of spiritual awareness, spiritual conduct, spiritual knowledge, we would, as we are, would be quite far away. How far anyone is from attaining that particular state is very difficult for us to know. Obviously, those with omniscience, Keval Gnan, would know. And if you look at all the histories of people who have achieved moksha, for example, the one that we most prominently hear during Paryushan and in the reading of Kalp Sutra is the life of Bhagwan Mahavir. We talk about his 27 lives and the slow progress that he made from the first life. But remember that the lives of anybody's progress from one end to moksha is only counted from the time that they actually get the realization of their true self. So they get samyaktva, they begin to understand and believe in the right Dev, meaning the right person to worship, the right guru, following the right teacher, and following the right path. So, Sudev, Suguru, Sudharma, spiritual progress only starts at that stage, and that is when the Tirthankar's life are being counted from. And if you look at the time span, from the time that Bhagwan Mahavir's soul in his first life to the time that he became Bhagwan Mahavir, say for example in his third life as Marichi, he was around at the time of Bhagwan Rishabdev. This time span that is being described between Bhagwan Rishabdev and Bhagwan Mahavir Swami was a huge number of years. You can't put that in numbers. It's almost about one Koda Kodi Sagaropam, and a Sagaropam is a huge length of time. So the journey of a soul, and we'll come to that at some time in the future, and how it is being described, the soul's spiritual progress starts when we enter what is called Charamavart Kal. Charamavart is the life cycle sort of that we would go through, and there is some inkling of spiritual virtues that begin to appear for the soul at that time, and slowly over hundreds and millions of lifetimes that progress slowly gets better and better until the time that we achieve what is called samyaktva. Even from the point of achieving samyaktva and getting to moksha, the time may be very short, but it could be as long as what is called Ardha Pudgal Paravartan Kal, which is again an infinite almost number of years. So the progress can be very slow, but with respect to what has gone on in the past, entering the Charamavarta Kal for any soul is a huge act of progress. Achieving Samyaktva, even if it takes another Ardha Pudgal, half Pudgal Paravartan Kal, is still an extremely magnificent achievement, and I often describe that as winning the biggest lottery anywhere in the universe. So, in answer to your question as to can we do it in this life, our Shastra says that in this time, from this Parakshetra, the route to moksha is not open because the level of strength and the penance and the spiritual development that is needed cannot exist because of the time that we are living in. The last person who achieved Kevalgnan and went to moksha was Jambu Swami, who was sometime after Bhagwan Mahavir. So there is a very great story about Jambu Swami. After that, nobody has gone to moksha from this particular Bharat Kshetra. Obviously, the doors to moksha are always open in Mahavidya Kshetra. That is where all the 20 Tirthankars are. The nearest one to us is Simandar Swami, as probably all of you know. So, no, the doors are not open at the moment, but obviously, as we progress spiritually, hopefully most of us will be there sooner or later.
Okay. There was a question, Ajit Bhai, about the story that you have just said about Chitra,
Chilatiputra.
Shilatputra and Sushima.
Yeah.
So Shilatputra and Sushima were the ones who ended up in Devlok previously.
Yes.
And then they ended up back on Earth again. Is that correct?
Yes.
So
correct.
why did they end up back on Earth once they were in Devlok? Wouldn't they then be progressing further?
You see, Devlok is a place where the soul goes to experience the material happiness from the punya that the soul has acquired in the previous life. So, and the spiritual awakening that one may have acquired in the previous life when they formed the Ayushya karma for the life in Devlok, that spiritual progress may have been superficial, may not progress, and once in Devlok, they may not actually be very spiritually aware, but even if they are, all the pleasures of being in Devlok are so enticing that it's easy to forget. So there are souls in Devlok who have samyaktva, who remain detached from all the pleasures. They have no choice but to enjoy those pleasures, but they don't go down spiritually. But the problem with being in Devlok is that there is nothing you can do in terms of further spiritual progress. You can do good deeds to acquire more punya, but if you ask a Dev that maybe you can sit down for 15 minutes or an hour in meditation to get rid of your karmas, or you can fast for one day. A Dev may not want to eat or may not need food for 1,000 years, but he cannot take a vow like you and I can do and say, I will fast for the next 24 hours, so I'll do an upvas. A Dev cannot do any of that. A Dev cannot become a monk, so he cannot take any vows like that, because that is the nature of the state they are in. They are in Devlok, we are there just to enjoy the benefits of the punya that we acquired. Similarly, in Narak, we are there to suffer the punishment for all the pap that we've done. And again, in Narak, we don't have any choice but to suffer the pain. But even in Narak, if you are somebody who has got samyaktva, who understands what is right and wrong, you suffer the pain with equanimity. And currently, there is an example, as I maybe quoted last time, I'm not sure, that the next Tirthankar of the Tirthankar in this Parakshetra for the next time cycle, Raja Shrenik, who is going to be the first Tirthankar called Padmanabh, is currently in Narak. So that's the story that we recited last time. And he's suffering. He's not able to do any penance, but he's got this awareness that is alive in him. The awareness of knowing who he is, what he's suffering from, and he maintains his equanimity. So he's not acquiring many more bad karmas. And he understands that this is the state that one has to be in to pay for what one has done. And our Shastra says that we've all been to all these places, not once, twice, hundreds, probably millions of times. And unfortunately, we don't remember any of that. We just have to understand that that is reality and try and incorporate that in how we think about ourselves and our lives on a daily basis.
Thank you, Ajit Bhai. There's just another question that has just come in.
Yes, I've seen that.
It's saying that how does one know that someone has gone to Devlok or Moksha? Example, is there any evidence to prove that Lord Mahavir went to Moksha?
You see, the soul is ephemeral, meaning it is not material. Apart from the knowledge of the Tirthankars and our Shastras, individually our senses would not know. Our knowledge is limited to what we see and what we gather from our senses. It's impossible for us to know when anybody has gone to Moksha or to Devlok or to Narak. You see, in terms of evidence, we think of all this from an angle of material evidence. I mean, the existence of the soul can be understood from where we are in terms of what happens during life and how we suffer pain or we get rewarded. There are also people who have remembered their past lives, and there are very good examples of those well documented of young children, others remembering in great detail where they were in their previous lives. So if it is true for a few such instances that there is evidence for, then we can extend that argument to the fact that the soul has come from somewhere, and that should be true for every soul. If it is true for one soul, two souls, many examples that are there of reincarnation, then it stands to reason and logic that that should be the case, because that stands logically. That is something that makes sense, that there needs to be a reward system, that there needs to be a natural system of rewarding and punishing for deeds that are not necessarily punished or rewarded in this lifetime. And that cycle is something that needs to carry on. And if it is not in this body that will suffer or be rewarded, then there has to be another body. And the mechanism by which all that happens are the laws of karma. So there is no physical evidence, but at some stage, for a lot of these spiritual discourses, you could start with faith and logic.
Okay.
There are a couple of questions on the chat at the moment. Can I?
Yeah, that's what I'm going through these ones on the chat at the moment. Do we have a choice for when you leave a certain lok, to which sort of lok we can go to, or is that so if we leave Devlok, do we have a choice to return to Earth, or is there a choice to go to another lok? Again, I think this is a question for Rishi Munis to answer, yeah. I guess.
Well, there is a very beautiful book called Jailer. It's very well written in English as well, and there's a beautiful Gujarati translation. Mukul has been distributing these books to a lot of people in English. And Jailer is describing our state as said, if you have committed a crime and you are put in jail, and the judge has decided that your sentence is 20 years, then the jailer is implementing that sentence and keeps you locked up in the jail for 20 years. And while you are there, you suffer whatever is punishment is meted out to you. And whatever the jailer may do as part of his duties to mete out that punishment is something that he is following orders. So basically everything that we suffer from, we are imprisoned in this body. Everything that we suffer from, and we feel that other people are doing it to us, they are like the jailer. They have no choice. They are just instruments of our own karmas. So from that point of view, we have very little choice. The choice that we have is how we live our life, and as a result of the good deeds and the good spiritual progress that we may make, as we saw in today's example, Upsam Vivek Samvar, the reversal of this murderers, the murdering robbers, Chilati Putras, state of mind and the state of his being that happened over 2.5 days would have transformed his spiritual progress forever. But that does not mean that everything bad that he had done is forgotten. Sooner or later, one would have to suffer a lot of that, but the point about spiritual progress and penance and all that is that a lot of the bad deeds and the bad karmas that one has acquired are modifiable. And we'll come to that when we discuss the 8 karmas. They are modifiable because not all of them are very tightly bound. Like we saw in King Shrenik's example last week, there's nothing that he could do to change that. But in the Prasan Chandra Rajas's example, those were not tightly bound. They could be released. Those bad karmas that would have taken him to the 7th hell actually were completely got rid of. So that is the choice that we have. But once a karma and the decision has been made about our next life, so that is the forming of the Aisha karma, then in that state it's not modifiable. But in the books of the accounting books of nature, nothing gets lost. Everything.
Yeah, thank you, Ajit Bhai. We are running out of time a little bit, and there is a few more questions which we will try and deal with in next week's session.
Yeah.
But for
just
now,
very quickly, in 1 minute, this question: we know of the current 24 Tirthankars, and there are going to be 20 others in the future. Were there previous Tirthankars before the current 24? It is also mentioned that we can't go to moksha in this lifetime, but can we go to Mahavidya Kshetra? Yes. So the answer to the second question is yes. Once we die, if you acquired the Ayushya karma for being born in Mahavidya Kshetra as a human being, definitely we can go there. But we don't know whether we will or not. But it all depends on what sort of Ayushya karma we find. And your question, current 24 Tirthankars, there are going to be 20 others? No, that is what I said was that there are 20 others in Mahavidya Kshetra at the moment. So there are 32 Vijayas in each Mahavidya Kshetra, so there are 160 Vijayas in Mahavidya Kshetra, and each one of them can have a Tirthankar. At the moment, there are about 20 Tirthankars in those 20 different Vijayas. The nearest one to us is Simandar Swami in the Mahavidya Kshetra that is nearest to us. And before this current 24 Tirthankars, were there previous Tirthankars before the current 24? Yes, in every time cycle in the Bharat Kshetras, the 5 Bharat Kshetras and 5 Airavat Kshetras, there are 24 Tirthankars because the time cycle keeps on changing. And each time cycle there are 24 Tirthankars. So one Utsarpini Kal and one Ausarpini Kal, there are 24, 24. And that cycle keeps on going. And that has been going on for infinite time in the past and will carry on in infinite time in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ajit Bhai. I will now pass back to Shandip Bhai. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Kavit Bhai, for firing those questions. You're a very good host, actually. I think you'll do very well in question and answer sessions. So well done. Ajit Bhai, thank you so much for the session today. Really informative, and of course the story, etc., is very, very pertinent as well. So thank you for that. Thank you all for
very briefly before I sort of end this, just from my end, I'll say Ichhami Duktam for anything that I might have said that is against the principles of Jainism and the teachings of the great Tirthankars. Ichhami Duktam, Manusan Kaya Kare, yes, Ichhami Duktam. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, carry on.
So just a couple of quick announcements before we close. This week we are due to send out a survey, a student survey to all of you. It will be done by email and WhatsApp. So you may get a double dose basically of the surveys. Please do answer the questions. There are only 5 or 6 questions, closed questions. It'll only take you a minute or 2 to do them. It'll give us a really good feel for the makeup of our class, where we are with everything, and then we will take action accordingly, where if we need to split the classes on different levels, then we'll do that. So don't worry, we are looking at how we can accommodate everyone, but we just need to see where the baseline is for everyone in terms of the classes. I will try and send out the book list if we can in this email, but otherwise Ajit Bhai is talking to the the publishers to see if we can buy some books in bulk and get them to you. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, I will send out a download request link. Basically, this is from a member of Oshal who lives now in Singapore. She's launched her own album called Atma, and it's available only to Oshal members as a free download. It's a beautiful album, so do take advantage of that, and play it in your phones, in your car, whatever. On that note, I'd like to thank all of you for attending every week and also watching catch up on YouTube, which many people are. So again, just subscribe to the playlist, which is open only to our class members, so it's not open to everyone else. So do take advantage of that, and I know many of you are catching up every week, so we are getting good numbers. On that note, I'd like to again reiterate Michami Dukram to all of you. Enjoy the week ahead. Those who may be doing unwell, keeping good sata as well for all of you, and we'll see you all next week on Tuesday. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you all.
समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार छे 14 पुरवनो सार समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार छे 14 पुरवनो सार एना महिमानो नहीं पार एनो अर्थ अनंत अपार एना महिमानो नहीं पार एनो अर्थ अनंत अपार समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार छे 14 पुरवनो सार समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार छे 14 पुरवनो सार सुख मा समरो दुख मा समरो समरो दिवस निरात जीवता समरो मरता समरो समरो सौ संगात समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार छे 14 पुरवनो सार समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार छे 14 पुरवनो सार योगी समरे भोगी समरे समरे राजा रंग देवो समरे दानव समरे समरे सोनी शंख समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार छे 14 पुरवनो सार समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार छे 14 पुरवनो सार अड़सत अक्षर